Season 4 Rick and Morty is coming, and you gotta take care of it. Whether you're a diehard Rick and Morty fan or just a guy who squanched too hard at a party one night and lost all his memories, I'm sure we could all use a quick recap of the last 3 seasons. The multiverse can get confusing, yo, and I've personally never seen a single episode sober, so I need this recap just as much as you do. I'm Whitney Van Laningham, and here's what everybody on C137 needs to know about Rick and Morty seasons 1 through 3. Season 1. Rick and Morty originally started out as a Back to the Future parody called The Real Animated Adventures of Doc and Marty.
And stick your tongue on my balls. I'm a doctor, Marty. Trust me, Marty.
All right, Doc. Say no more.
The 5-minute short introduces Doc and Marty, based on Dr. Emmett Brown and Marty McFly, only with a lot more ball licking. Jesus Christ, there is so much ball licking. I'm actually pretty glad that they dropped the excessive testalingus, because seeing Rick and Morty engage on a grandfather-grandson level is a lot more dynamic.
Morty, you gotta, come on. You gotta come with
What,
me.
Rick? What's going on?
The first season introduces us to the Smith family, Jerry, Beth, Summer, and Morty, who live with Beth's zany science dad, Rick Sanchez. The creators kept the important parts of the original concept intact, like how weird it is for a kid to hang around with a sociopathic mad scientist with a drinking problem, while introducing a new family dynamic built around the original characters. Rick is a science genius who knows every single detail about the endless possibilities of the multiverse, which allows him to create insane scientific inventions for him and his grandson Morty to use on their adventures. Of course, because he's incredibly intelligent, he also knows how pointless, painful, and existence is, so he's right there at that sweet intersection of narcissistic, misanthropic, emotionally abusive, and reckless too.
I can't abide bureaucracy. I don't like being told where to go and what to do. I consider it a violation. Did you get those seeds all the way up your butt?
Yeah, Rick.
Morty could not be more different. He's not very smart, he's super easy to manipulate, and for the most part he's pretty empathetic. In a given situation, Rick would probably choose to blow up a planet just to shave 5 minutes off his drive to pick up some Calaxian crystals in the testicle monster dimension. Morty, on the other hand, would try to, teach his grandfather a lesson on the value of life, and then someone would probably still die anyway. But that being said, Morty's proven to be able to hold his own in a crisis, so he and Rick might be a little more connected than they think.
Taking the wheel.
Get off of me, Morty.
I'm taking
Come on.
charge of this situation, buddy.
What's gotten into you?
Beth Smith is a horse surgeon, Summer is a typical teenage girl, and Jerry is a total Jerry. While Rick and Morty are traveling through time and space on questionable adventures, Beth and Jerry spend most of their time arguing about their marriage. And although Summer clearly has above average intelligence, she's constantly struggling to fit in with her peers as well as with her brother and grandpa.
And if you think my top is cute, you cannot execute.
Very well. Give the Earth people a spacecraft.
Rick and Morty's adventures begin when Rick is nice and drunk and fired up to fly a spaceship to an alternate timeline, usually to accomplish increasingly bizarre missions. Our first introduction to their quality time together is Rick dragging Morty onto his homemade UFO in the middle of the night with a neutrino bomb meant to stop and then restart the world. He then convinces Morty to ditch school and jump through his interdimensional portal to find a species of alien megaseeds that make the consumer hyper-intelligent. Obviously, he convinces Morty to shove them way, way deep into his butthole in order to smuggle them back to Earth C-137, their original planet. As promised, Morty becomes super smart before the seeds wear off, and he's able to convince his parents that he's learning more by going on adventures with Rick than he would be in school. Of course, 30 seconds later, the seeds wear off and he loses all motor function for 72 hours. But the important thing is he's bonding with his grandfather.
Rick and Morty forever and forever 100 years. Rick and Morty some things.
Although Rick's inventions are inarguably genius, they're largely the center of chaos in the first season. Yeah, it's cool that he created a device to make the family dog sentient, but was it still cool when Snuffles created an intelligent dog army that nearly succeeded in enslaving all of humanity? Not so much. And obviously, in theory, a theme park inside of a haggard mall Santa would be kinda cool, but once it becomes a giant inflated corpse raining blood and innards all over greater North America, Pirates of the Pancreas doesn't sound like nearly as much fun.
That was my passion project, Whitney.
I'm sorry!
Pirates of the Pancreas was my baby. You know, I got a lot of pushback when I pitched it, Morty. I guess I'm still a little defensive.
Plus, I think we all remember how his Rick Potion number 9 turned out. Instead of making Jessica fall in love with Morty at the school dance, it turns the entire dimension into nightmare Cronenberg monsters. And yeah, Jerry and Beth seem to be rekindling their love in that sweet Mad Max mobile, but at what cost? Rick ends up having to portal gun them to a universe where the crisis is fixed, but they both die shortly after. Rick and Morty C-137 pop into this new dimension, bury their own dead bodies, and continue on. It's horrifying. But hey man, not everything Rick brings to the table is bad. Mr. Meeseeks is one of the best characters this season.
I'm Mr. Meeseeks. Look at me.
A Meeseeks has to follow through on whatever you ask it to help you with, and once it finishes its task, it explodes into sweet oblivion. Existence is pain for a Meeseeks, so you can imagine how shitty it is when a whole bunch of them get trapped alive trying to help Jerry take 2 strokes off his golf game.
I've been trying to help Jerry for 2 days, an eternity in Meeseeks time, and nothing's worked. I fear the worst. Your failures are your own, old man.
My other favorite part of the multiverse has to be interdimensional cable. And I get it, you'd rather have a butter-passing robot, but oh my god, I cannot tell you how badly I actually want to watch an episode of Ball Fondlers. The penultimate episode of Season 1 gives us our first glimpse at one of the only major through lines in this series, the reveal of Evil Rick and Evil Morty. And Evil Rick has been assassinating other Ricks throughout the multiverse, all the while framing Rick C-137 for the murders. Rick and Morty track him down to a dome with a Morty Matrix, a giant web of Mortys being tortured to prevent C-Rick-137 or the Council of Ricks from tracking down Evil Rick. Morty realizes that Rick has been using him and manipulating him all this time because of the balance of the Rick and Morty spectrums, and when the two are captured, Evil Rick reveals that he kidnapped Rick C-137 because he's the Rickest Rick of them all, making Morty the Mortiest Morty. Evil Rick plans to download Rick C-137's brain, but luckily, Morty leads the rest of the captured Mortys in an uprising against the Council of Ricks. The Morty mob kills Evil Rick, saving Rick, and proving to the Council of Ricks that Rick C-137 was innocent.
We would like to compensate you with this voucher for a free replacement Morty in the event that your current Morty should... guys?
But in a shocking twist, it turns out that Evil Rick was being controlled by an advanced technological device with a remote receiver, located inside Evil Morty's eye patch. In the season finale, Rick and Summer decide to throw an intergalactic house party, while Beth and Jerry are away on a weird Titanic simulation vacation. We learn all about Calaxian crystals, how to do the Rick dance, and even Wubba Lubba Dub Dub's true meaning.
It's not nonsense at all. In my people's tongue, it means, I am in great pain. Please help me.
And honestly, there are too many great characters in this episode. We've got Squanchy, an alien cat who's really into autoerotic asphyxiation, Tammy, a senior high school girl in Summer's class, and Bird Person, Rick's best friend. But after Abradolph Linkler dies, Bird Person and Tammy depart, and Squanchy's done squanchin'. Rick, Morty, and Summer are left to clean up the trashed house. As usual, Rick comes up with a crazy idea to freeze time for 6 months so that they can take their time cleaning up after the party, and that's where Season 2 picks up.
Worst movie ever.
Oh boy, what a waste of time.
Season 2. After restoring time, Beth and Jerry are none the wiser, but Rick, Morty, and Summer are all out of time whack. They're unstable, so any uncertainty combined with physical touch could split their realities. Obviously, that's exactly what happens. Rick tries to use a time crystal to merge their timelines, but because Morty and Summer are feeling so uncertain about who Rick's favorite grandchild is, they end up running into a fourth dimensional being that tries to take them to time prison for their violation. In the end, Rick sacrifices himself to return Morty to the initial timeline, proving that he really does love his grandson after all. Aww. If you think time crimes are hardcore, you better strap in for the rest of the moral dilemmas this season. There's a whole episode where Morty rescues a chill singing fart cloud from certain death, only to have to murder him at the end of the episode because the pretty glowy fart cloud turned out to want to annihilate the galaxy. And Summer doesn't handle meeting Rick's ex-girlfriend Unity very well either. Unity is a collective hive mind that takes on the bodies of hosts and assimilates them. Unity has multiple genders, races, and species, which is one of the reasons why she's so powerful. But while Rick is off getting naked and wasted with his exes, Summer tries to free the bodies that Unity inhabited with her hive mind. When she does, they all revert to regular creeps, and Summer learns the hard way that being part of Unity was much better for these people than being individuals. But that episode is a great reminder that Rick is a deeply broken person, despite the egocentric genius shtick he normally presents to the world. When Unity leaves him, she explains that they're just too destructive to be together. Rick tries to kill himself with a laser in the garage, but luckily he passes out just before the beam fries him. But hey, when reality's a bummer, why not get a brain-munching parasite that creates a whole new one for ya? The family is taken over by memory parasites that feed on their brain while introducing new zany characters into their lives. By far the best character this season is Mr. Poopy Butthole. As the memory parasites are exposed and killed off, he's the only one that seems to stick around the whole time. Beth finally gets suspicious and shoots Mr. Poopy Butthole, who turns out to not be a memory parasite. Way to go, Beth. Jeez. Too bad you're not a real surgeon, or you probably could have removed the bullet yourself. I'm sorry. I'm not thinking clearly. This is all Jerry's fault. PB survives though, thank God. Not all my favorite Season 2 characters are memory parasites or gravely wounded longtime family friends. Ice MF&T shows up! An alien race called the Cromulans arrive and force Earth to participate in a musical reality competition show. You know Ice showed up to help write classic hits like Get Swifty, and even threw himself in Ice Alpha Betrium form right in front of the Cromulans' giant laser. But okay, I know Ice-T can't take all the credit for Get Swifty. The lyrics on the floor could have only been written by a scientific genius like Rick Sanchez. And if it wasn't for Bird Person's pep talk to Morty about believing in Rick, Morty would have never gotten back to the stage in time to save Earth. The theme of Rick's inventions in Season 2 seems to be Honey, I Shrunk Myself. We learn that Rick powers his car battery with a tiny mini-verse of organisms that have no idea that all their physical labor is going towards a spacecraft engine. Oh, and speaking of his car, Jesus Christ, keep Summer safe doesn't mean murder half the police force. But whatever, back to the insiest best invention of them all, Tiny Rick! Rick puts his brain in a teenager's body so that he can protect Summer from vampires at school. But of course, his brain has more sinister plans. Basically, Tiny Rick wants to stay Tiny Rick forever, so he tries to kill his older body. Luckily, Morty and Summer shove some headphones with Elliott Smith playing into his ear holes, and Rick becomes cynical and once more, allowing his grandkids to shove his consciousness back into his grandpa body.
Connect the blue one to my left temple, and the red one to why doesn't anyone really like me?
Focus, Grandpa!
Just put the stupid wires on my head. I hate being a teenager.
But while Tiny Rick is rocking high school and taking down vampires, Beth and Jerry go off-world for marriage counseling. As usual, their relationship is on the rocks, and Rick assures them that Glexo Slim Slom is the only therapist in the multiverse experienced enough to help them. Their first task is for Beth to create a version of Jerry that she perceives him to be, and vice versa. This results in two monsters, the strong, scary version of Beth that Jerry sees, and the pathetic, groveling worm version of Jerry that Beth sees. Their monsters end up destroying the entire simulation, but somehow Beth and Jerry still learn to fight for each other and see each other differently in the process. So a whole therapy center got destroyed, but at least their marriage survived another day. Yay! And speaking of survival, get this. The galaxy's most influential civil rights leader, Shrimply Pibbles, needs Jerry's penis or he's gonna die. To distract themselves while Jerry is contemplating whether or not to donate his penis to the greater good, Rick, Morty, and Summer spend their time in the waiting room watching interdimensional cable again. And who doesn't want to learn how a plumbus is made or watch a guy steal your eye holes? In the end, Jerry doesn't give up his penis, but he definitely gets gunned down trying. Normally, I'd say that the hospital is a pretty weird place to end up with a belly full of lead, but I guess any possible scenario exists in the multiverse. And that's why nobody expected Tammy and Bird Person's wedding to turn into a bloodbath. When the Smith family and Rick travel to planet Squanched for the nuptials of a high school girl and a 40-year-old bird person, Rick is pretty pissed that his friend's giving up their adventures to get married. Bird Person explains to Beth that he and Rick are considered intergalactic terrorists after the many wars they fought for peace, and that they're so close because of all the battlefield trauma that they shared. Rick finally gives in and allows himself to be happy for Bird Person, but just then, Tammy whips out Galactic Federation ID and begins slaughtering wedding guests, including her new husband.
Bird Person! No!
Rick takes his family to a new planet to start over, but after hearing Beth and the rest of his family talk about how much they have to sacrifice just to have him in their lives, he decides to turn himself in. God damn it! That's why I like it that I get too stoned to remember the episodes. This season hit me right in the feels. Wubble-hubba-dub-dub, am I right? Alright, episode 1 could be a whole 20-minute recap on its own, so if I miss out on your favorite detail, stop whining like you did about the Szechuan sauce. See? There, I mentioned it. So, Rick's still trapped in Galactic Federal Prison, where he's being held in a brainalyzer that slowly melts his mind while the feds probe his memories for his portal gun formula. Obviously, Rick tricks them with a fake origin story about his wife and daughter, and gives them the formula to allow him to take over the brainalyzer. Meanwhile, Summer convinces Morty to help her break Rick out of prison, even though he and their parents have completely disowned Rick. They get captured by the Citadel of Ricks, who sends SEAL Team Ricks to the Galactic Federation to kill Rick C-137. While on trial for aiding their grandfather in crimes against the galaxy, Morty reveals that he never gave up on Rick, and that he was just trying to protect Summer from their incredibly dangerous missions.
I wanted you to have a normal life. That's something you can't have when Rick shows up. Everything real turns fake, everything right is wrong. All you know is that you know nothing and he knows everything.
Rick C-137 shows up in time to save Summer and Morty, resulting in a standoff with the last council member standing. Morty shoots Rick in the head with a fake gun, and Rick C-137 kills the other Rick. Rick then causes the Galactic Federation's government to crash, freeing Earth from its insect overlords. When they get home, Beth is ecstatic to see her dad, but Jerry tells her that she has to choose, Rick or him. Beth obviously chooses Rick because, hello, have you met Jerry? The episode ends with their decision to get a divorce. Oh, actually, the episode ends with a post-credits scene that shows Tammy creating an iron version of Bird Person called Phoenix Person. So yeah, the kids are not handling the divorce in a healthy way. When Jerry comes to say goodbye to them, Summer and Morty portal gun themselves into a post-apocalyptic universe. Rick injects Morty with some kind of drug that makes his arms super huge and full of murderous rage. While Morty is straight up annihilating aliens in the Blood Dome, Summer is hooking up with Hemorrhage, a guy with a giant bucket on his head. In the end, they both learn the valuable lesson that maybe they need to find a better way to deal with their parents' split. So I guess Rick sort of helped.
Here. It's the least I can do. I owe you this much. See, Morty? Now we're both accountable.
To avoid having to go to family counseling, Rick turns himself into a pickle. Morty figures out that he's planning on turning himself back into a human the second they leave, so Beth puts the syringe full of the antidote into her purse and takes the kids to therapy. Rick then gets swatted off the counter by a cat, rolled into the scorching sun, and then swept away by a storm into the sewer. He manages to kill and control a couple of cockroaches to make himself an exosuit out of their carcasses, which he uses to kill a rat and make a more sophisticated battlesuit. Once encased in rat meat, he kicks every sewer rat's ass and a bunch of guys at a top-secret agency. In the end, I guess the moral of this episode is that therapy is bullshit and sci-fi adventures are really cool. But like, IRL win on a portal gun, so take your meds, go to therapy. Okay, the next episode is Vindicator Street, which most people I've talked to have mixed feelings on. Obviously, the joke is that the creators are making fun of themselves for doing a superhero cash grab episode ironically, but I've actually heard that a lot of people thought that this episode was boring. Basically, Rick and Morty go on an adventure with the Vindicators, the space version of the Avengers, but drunk Rick from the night before designed a complicated trap to kill them. Their shitty behavior during the quest breaks Morty's hero worship of them, just as Rick intended. Morty's kinda disillusioned about adventures after that, so he sends Rick on an adventure with his dad so that he could de-stress without sciencing for a while. But of course, that doesn't work at all! Summer tries to give herself a boob job and fails miserably, so Beth tries to take her dad's inventions into her own hands. It's obviously a ploy to boost her self-esteem in the aftermath of her divorce, so Morty has to spend the entire episode trying to convince his mom to call Rick and let him fix Summer. Beth eventually returns Summer to normal through the powers of science and mom love. Meanwhile, Jerry is it up by collaborating with Rick's enemies to murder him for making Beth divorce him. But don't worry, they escape after tripping balls in a wormhole and agree never to speak of this adventure again.
Leave out the part where you tried to murder me.
And I'll leave out the part where you admitted to sabotaging our marriage.
Morty still isn't too keen on adventures, so he strongly resists when Rick tries to drag him off again. Besides, Jessica's finally single! He finally has a chance! But of course, Rick forces him to go, and their super quick 20 minutes tops mission ends up taking 6 days and most of their sanity. They decide to go to a spa where the relaxation sauna detoxifies them of all their worst qualities. But why would anything ever be chill for these guys? Their a-hole personas end up trying to kick the asses of their good personas, but toxic Rick and Morty end up making the whole world shitty. But after shooting Toxic Morty with a nanovirus, Good Rick and Toxic Rick agree to merge and restore the world. Jessica still doesn't like Morty, but at least she's glad to have him back. Continuing the through line of the series, we go back to the Citadel alone as viewers. Rick and Morty C-137 are getting some mermaid puss in Atlantis! We find the city just as corrupt as ever. Mortys without Ricks are running amok, Ricks with the same IQ as the other Ricks are working menial jobs, and there's even a Morty running for president. But despite his promises of unity and respect between Ricks and Mortys in the future, it turns out that it's evil Morty, aka the Rickest Morty. He clearly has his grandfather's sociopathic traits, and even though his campaign manager tries to expose his evil plans, evil Morty's people have him shot into space. Then, he slaughters all the Ricks who oppose him. Same old story, Morty's killing Mortys. And Ricks, but that doesn't rhyme. Alright, I do have some bad news. Season 3 doesn't have an interdimensional cable episode. Instead, we get Morty's Mind Blowers, a journey through all the memories Rick erased from Morty's mind. At first, it's just a bunch of dumb mistakes Morty made on their adventures, or memories of his family making fun of him, but then we learn how truly devoid of empathy Rick actually is.
Are the Redwood stuff you wanted removed?
Ooh, that's clever, Morty. But I don't use color to sort things because I'm not a mouse in a European children's book.
He's also been eternal sunshine of the spotless minding all of the horrible things that he's ever done to Morty. But Morty's not the only one who forgot a huge chunk of his life. The Smith family learns that the father of Beth's childhood friend Tommy is finally being executed for the murder of his son. But surprise, Tommy wasn't murdered. Tiny sociopath child Beth locked him in Fruipyland, the magical playscape that Rick built for her when she was a child. Apparently, Beth kept asking him to build her murder weapons, so Rick designed a safe place for his daughter to play. Unfortunately, because Tommy's been trapped in Fruipyland for over 2 decades, he's taken to mating with and eating the creatures in Fruipyland. Gross! Beth also learns that she is just one of Rick's infinite daughters in one of the infinite universes out there, and starts to worry that she might be a clone. Rick isn't exactly helpful. He tells her that she's not a clone, but Beth's pretty dang smart. She knows that's exactly what her dad would say if she was a clone. To find out who she really is, she turns to the only constant in her life, Jerry. After listening to Jerry's incredibly sweet story about their first kiss, Beth decides that she doesn't care if she's a clone or not. She's finally happy with Jerry, and the Smiths have a real shot of getting their family back together. Of course, Beth thinks that Rick will kill her when he realizes that she knows that she's a clone, so the family has to go into hiding. Meanwhile, Rick and Morty get into a dick measuring contest with the president. Not only are his top secret missions super boring, but the president also refuses to take a selfie with Morty, which is unacceptable. Rick and Morty decide to blow off America and play Minecraft, but the president quickly figures out that they're not working for him anymore. He tries to apprehend Rick and Morty, but they're already 10 steps ahead, fixing the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, negotiating with an alien race in the Amazon, and making the president look like a real dickbag. Rick and Morty give the president everything he wants with a huge middle finger thrown in there because they can. But when he finally convinces the president to give him a dumb selfie, Morty's nowhere to be found. And that's when Rick realizes that his family is trying to get away from him and start a new beginning without him. He pauses on his fight with the president and portals off to the cabin where the Smiths are now living. He convinces Beth that she's not a clone and begrudgingly accepts Jerry back into his family as his son-in-law. Obviously, Rick feels like he's done too much damage in this reality and asks Morty to come with him to another one.
Going to stay?
There's infinite timelines, Morty. Why would I stay in the one where I trashed the White House, became an enemy of America, and the lowest status character in my idiot family?
But thankfully, Summer's newfound talent to fart on cue just like her grandfather convinces Rick to stay. So, what can we expect from season 4? If there's anything we know about Rick and Morty, it's that the show's creators do not care what you expect or what you want. But I'm confident that it's gonna be good. I still have some questions though. Will Rick try to take the whole family to another multiverse now that they're back together? Will Beth and Jerry's renewed relationship stick this time? What's Mr. Poopy Butthole gonna do with his brand new GEEED? Let me know what you think in the comments, like and subscribe to NerdWire, and whatever you do, just don't be a goddamn Jerry, okay?